So I divided the talk to 3 parts. In the first part, I just tell what systematic review and meta-analysis are and why we do them. Then I go briefly through the step-by-step process of a whole systematic review and meta-analysis. And then at the end, I end up with some recommendations and guidelines on when to do a systematic review, which guidelines are there, which tools are out there. And I think I was invited to this talk because I did perform a systematic review for my PhD project. It's not yet finished. I'm still analyzing. I have preliminary results. Nevertheless, I use that as an example, and also I tell you what I learned from that project. So I thought first I give you a very brief introduction of that topic because I will go back to it all the time. So I guess everyone knows about attachment insecurity somehow. So it's associated with having negative views about yourself. I'm not worthy of love, or my needs are not important, or negative views about others. Others won't be there to support me if I need them. And not surprisingly, attachment insecurity is associated with higher negative emotions. But recently, some relationship experts suggest that if you're in a relationship, romantic relationship, and your partner is very supportive, that would help to reduce the negative emotions. So for example, if I'm very insecure, I have a fight with my partner, I feel super distressed. If my partner is so caring and understanding, that would reduce my distress. And this is called the buffering effect of romantic partner support. So I think another important thing is that I'm doing this, so those are my supervisors, Johan and Marcia here, but we're collaborating with another PhD student, Gina, and her supervisor, Dominic. They are based in the University of Freiburg in Switzerland, and we are doing everything together. And we agreed that the first authorship would be shared between us of the paper. Okay, now going to the what systematic reviews are. They're basically collecting and summarizing all studies on a given topic in a systematic way. What do we mean by systematic way? You follow standard procedures, you follow predefined criteria, and everything is transparent and documented. So if another researcher wants to do the same review, if they follow your steps, they should get the same hits, they should get the same results. What is meta-analysis? If you use quantitative methods or statistical methods to summarize the data, it is called meta-analysis. So systematic review can include a meta-analysis or not, depending if you use a statistical method to summarize your data or not. And the meta-analysis can be systematic or not. So you can also just take 5 papers, summarize the results statistically. That's a meta-analysis, but it's not a systematic meta-analysis. Why do we do systematic analysis and reviews in general? So every day there are so many new publications on any topic. They call it explosion of science or information. It is very difficult for an average reader, a practitioner, or even a researcher to collect all those studies, read them, and make sense out of them. So there is a need to collect all data, integrate them and into a whole and make meaningful sense out of them. That is why, that is why the reviews came to life. But so traditionally at the beginning, we had these narrative reviews. They were not done systematically. So there was usually the experts in the field, based on the articles or research that was already known to them, they would go read all those papers, think about them. They, of course, already had some pre-assumptions about how things are going to go. Then they kind of put their thoughts together, made conclusions, and wrote them down. Well, the problem with that method is that probably not all studies are covered. It is heavily based on subjective thoughts and pre-assumptions of the author, so it is prone to bias. And you cannot follow or trace the thought processes of a person, so it's quite intractable and therefore not replicable. And therefore there was criticism on those narrative reviews that are they scientifically sound at all or not? And therefore systematic reviews came to life. As I said, they follow standard procedures to collect data, so they have all studies. They're based on predefined criteria, so they're as objective as possible, and they're replicable. I have a good example here. on my topic, the buffering effect, few months ago, a Nature review came out on exactly my topic by collaboration of two big experts in the field. Well, first I was like, oh, shit. Sorry. Like, I've been working on this for 2 years and oops. But then I thought, okay, this is not systematically done. Let's go look at it. And when I went into that paper, first of all, out of 25 papers that we include in my review, only 7 of them were in that paper. So you see that the coverage is low. They mostly supported the buffering effect. They're also the people who actually proposed the buffering effect. So that review also really advocated the buffering effect. I don't remember if I saw any opposing results for buffering effect. Interestingly, now that I have preliminary insight into my results, the buffering effect may not exist. We don't have much support for that, or it may exist on very specific situations. So I saw this quote in the internet from a meta-analysis expert. I really liked it. It said, whenever I've been involved in a systematic review, they've always thrown up surprises. You think you know everything that's out there on a given topic, but I continue to be surprised at how much information there is available. And we really thought this buffering effect is there. I based my PhD project on that. So that's very interesting findings, actually, if you see it's not strongly there. So the benefits of systematic reviews, they give you a clear overview of your research topic. You can maybe even see, oh, clear answer is already given to some effect. I don't need to go do more research on it. And it can also clarify conflicting evidence. Another use of it is that by reviewing our papers, you can also identify theoretical and methodological gaps in the field. And that could, of course, inform future research. So I would say in a nutshell, systematic reviews are a good way to stand on the shoulders of giants. So just the rest. What are the processes? The first step is, of course, formulating your research question. It's good to be as specific as possible. So at the beginning of my PhD, I was so naive that I thought, oh, by a systematic review, I will get an overview of the whole field. So I started with these 3 broad research questions, like how is attachment insecurity associated with emotion and emotional regulation? What are the underlying mechanisms? What is the role of romantic partner support? Yeah, you will see why it was problematic. Some better examples are here. Is massage therapy effective for reducing state anxiety? Or do men and women differ in terms of risk-taking behaviors? Or what proportions of patients with schizophrenia show improvements after treatment? So these are specific. And to be more specific, you define inclusion and exclusion criteria, in which time frame you want the studies to be performed. For me, I started from the time attachment theory was established. Which language? It's recommended for systematic reviews to go out of English and look at other languages, but I say with English, I cannot afford other than that, except for Persian. Sample characteristics, for example, I wanted adults that are involved in romantic relationships, design characteristics, study types, if you want to include only published papers, peer-reviewed, or you want to also look at gray literature, that's also recommended to do. What outcome measures should be there, etc. So after you define your research question, the next step is screening, searching for literature. You go to databases. It is recommended to go to several databases such as Web of Science, PubMed, PsycInfo, and search in several of them because there are overlaps between them, but they don't cover everything. You have to define your search terms. They are very important. You want search terms that give you all studies, but you don't want them to be too broad to give you so many irrelevant studies. So these are the ones that I had for my project. So attachment, the word attachment I put, all synonyms of emotion, emotional regulation, and partner support, and all synonyms of romantic relationships, like married couples, spouse, dating couple, diet, everything. So you have to go and try it out and then see how many hits you get. You don't want to get like 10,000 hits. You don't want to get only 200 hits. So you want to get something between probably 1,000 to 3,000 hits. And each database has its own ways of defining search terms. So that's a bit of a hassle, but it's okay. I wanted to say something else, but I don't remember. Oh yeah, also check, you always know some papers should be included. So it's good to check if with your search terms, you actually hit those papers. And then you of course want to define search limitations like time, language or so. And here an extra step would be to write and submit a review protocol. A review protocol is something like a pre-registration. It's a roadmap to a whole review, and you can also submit it. I will later tell you there are some guidelines on that. And then of course you go and do your actual search, and of course you want to document the date, all the number of hits you get, etc. After you do your search, you go to the screening process. So the first thing you do is that because you search in several databases, you will get duplicates. So you remove those duplicates. So I arrived to 7,700 papers because it was so broad topic. Don't do that. We had 1,048 duplicates. Then you go and just read the titles and abstracts of those papers to review them against your inclusion criteria. For us, it was after removing duplicates, we had 6,652 papers and 5,239 were excluded. And then you upload the full text or download the full text of those papers that are included, and then you go review the full text according to your criteria. And there from 1,413, I had 1,019 excluded, and I arrived to 395 papers. And that's one of the parts. The problem was that, yeah, too many. You cannot do a systematic review on that. That was the problem with my broad research topics. So we divided it to several papers, and we focused on the buffering effect, as I told you, that's specific. And that gave us 25 papers, including 43 studies. Some points here are that you will have to specify things again. So for example, we said negative emotions, but then is depression a negative emotion? We had to make decisions on that. We had emotional regulation. Is alcohol consumption an emotional regulation strategy or not? We had to make decisions on that. You say, I want adults mean age 18 years old of the sample. Then you have a sample that the mean age is 18 years old, but the youngest one is like 14 years old. Is 14-year-old an adult? So you have to be very specific. For example, we said minimum age 16, average age 18. At least. And so you have to you will encounter so many things, and then you keep making decisions, and it's good to document all those decisions. Another thing is that it's suggested to do this process multiple researchers, because it's a lot of papers, you go through them, it's boring, it's repetitive, you make mistakes. So we did everything like in parallel, and then if there were conflicts, we resolved the conflicts and went to the next step. Documentary decisions. Also another thing I want to say, with having another person, it reduces the error, but it's also of high emotional support, because it is a boring process. It's overwhelming. It's very nice to have someone next to you that constantly you can discuss with each other, you can make decisions, and there's someone else next to you, like sharing the burden. And this was again another mistake, that I thought when I read these papers, I will have knowledge of all the papers in the field, like, well, awesome. But actually, there are too many. You don't have time to read the papers. You just go to keywords, like, is the word interaction mentioned there or not? Like, you go to the specifics of subjects, like, you get a very good idea of what is a well-written paper, or you unconsciously absorb a lot, but you don't get the content of the papers. You don't get knowledge of you don't get the big picture. You get lost in the details. until you have your final results together, then you get the big picture, or the last 25 papers that you read. Next step. So you found your papers, you want to collect information. Of course, it depends on your research question. You define coding sheets, and then you collect study characteristics like the design, the sample characteristics like for sample size and other characteristics that you think may be important for you and may influence the results. And of course, the results, effect sizes, the direction of effect. Again, some points here that it's good to do double coding again, and so it's highly recommended. And then you have to do an iterator reliability to see if your codes are reliable, because you are prone to error. My suggestion, my supervisor kept telling that to me. I tried to, it was difficult, but now that I'm writing my results, I see, now I understand what she meant. Really try to write down your results before collecting your data, because yeah, it's funny because she told that to me, because she said like then they had to go back again and again to the papers. So I try to collect all data, but still now that I'm writing the results again, they're like, oh, was this like this or that? Okay, I have to go again and look at the papers. So I don't know if you can actually stop, not be able to do that, but yeah, and document everything. Yeah, the next step, this is a very important step, but it is not much done when you look at other systematic reviews, is evaluating the quality of the paper. So in all courses and guidelines, it's highly recommended. And the idea is that those studies are your raw data. So the same way that you go and check your raw data in an empirical study to see if there are outliers or impossible values, you have to go check the quality of your data. In the courses, they usually use the term garbage in, garbage out. So if the studies are not of high quality, the results, your review results are not very reliable. And there is also discussion about quality versus risk of bias. So there's so many different ways and scales to measure the quality. It's highly subjective. For example, one question is, if the method, the best suitable method to answer the research question. It's like, who am I to tell that? So instead, more advanced, I would say, guidelines, they look at risk of bias. And that means where there was a risk of bias, where there was a risk that things may go wrong. For example, if there was an intervention, was there a control condition or not? Or is the sample representative of the whole population or not? So those things that you know bias may happen, and then go check them. You can use this evaluation in two ways. You can say, I exclude all those papers that they had low quality, or you can say, I look at the results with the knowledge that these papers have lower quality, these ones have higher quality. I haven't seen an example of how exactly people do that. Sometimes they report just a number of the quality, but it's not recommended. It's recommended to say like, this paper had low external validity for this reason. So I've seen it also as a column in limitations of the study. Yeah, I haven't seen papers that they actually used it, but it's highly recommended. And I said that reviews can be used to find methodological gaps in the field. And I think this can also help because, for example, in my case, all studies, the age is under 35 years. It's not representative of the whole population, of course. And that's something that you can like discuss in your discussion and suggest for other age groups. Next part, I wanted to say the difficult part, but they're all difficult. Analyzing and integrating the outcomes and also interpreting those results. So you can, as I said, sometimes you cannot do a meta-analysis. In my case, I cannot do a meta-analysis because I'm looking at an interaction effect. And if you want to do meta-analysis on the interaction effect, all your models should be exactly the same. They should have exactly the same control variables. So in my studies, one of them looked at gender as control variable, one of them looked at relationship quality. So it's impossible to do that. So I'm going to go for narrative, or there is another thing called vote counting. And that is basically you, for example, say attachment anxiety, so higher attachment anxiety, higher negative emotion, you expect a positive effect. Then you can say how many of those studies found a positive effect, how many of those studies found a negative effect. Then the winner is the ones that have the vote. It was, at the beginning, it was based on only significant effects, but apparently it has a very low power and you always find no effect if you go with significant effects. So now they say only the directional effect. And I think I may go for something like that. And the best thing you can do, I think most of the time, is to do a meta-analysis, but it depends on the homogeneity of your study. So you want that conceptually and theoretically you have homogeneous studies, that it makes sense to collect them together. So I don't know, maybe if they measure negative emotion through physiological response and subjective experience of emotion, like, can you put them together? I don't think so. You cannot make an effect size that is average of effect sizes for them. So after you do the meta-analysis, you can get an overall or average size of the direction of the effect. You can see, you usually test, like you do some moderation analysis to see if study characteristics predicted the results. So for example, if attachment insecurity predicts higher emotion, negative emotions, if in relationships with that very longer period, it was like stronger or weaker. So those study characteristics that you collected can help here to do moderation analysis. So you will see if your effect size is constant across all situations or if it varies across the studies and related to study characteristics. Ooh. And you can also assess the publication bias. Finally, the final step, you report. It's similar to other studies. You have introduction, method, results, and discussion. Yeah, I don't go into details of that. Last part, recommendations and guidelines. So advantages and disadvantages of systematic reviews. They are absolutely valuable to science, to scientists, and to you yourself. They will be most probably highly cited, so it's also good for your career. I think you get a lot of growth out of it because you see a lot of papers. I really now have an idea. I really understand now what it means to use, like, I don't know, for relationship quality, use one type of part of the paper, relationship satisfaction, another part happiness. And you're like, oh God, why can't you just use one specific word? Because that decides if that study is in my review or not. You really get an idea of what is a good reporting, what is a bad reporting, what is a good structure of the paper. Of course, because you have to do the quality assessment to get a good idea of what is good research, and also a more realistic viewpoint about research and like LP hacking and stuff that we've been talking about. Yeah. It takes a lot of time, typically 12 to 18 months. Mine, it has been 2 years now, and I'm just getting the results, so I still have to write. And, yeah. The process becomes boring, and I said, and it can become overwhelming and challenging. Should I do a review? These are some considerations you can take into account. Is there enough literature on your review? Do you have a specific and clearly defined research question that can be answered by a systematic review? Do you have time and stamina to do that? Do you have a team of experts? So you need a librarian. It's better if you are 2 people to do that together. You want people who are experts in the subjects. When you have like, is depression an emotion or not? You need an expert to kind of to tell that to you, or it will be easier. And it would be amazing if you have someone who has done that before and is a kind of an expert to be with you, because yeah, there are a lot of decisions you have to make. Yeah, I read it somewhere. They said you should ask yourself if you can afford to have articles rather than English. I'm not sure how much that plays a role. It didn't play a role for me. Okay, there are a lot of guidelines. I use myself Prisma, the first one, especially for writing the protocol, but it's usually for randomized control trials. So most of guidelines are for randomized control trials. So if you want to do them, good for you. If not, yeah, it's a bit difficult. There's also Cochrane. It's a handbook. There are guidelines on every step, but also quality assessment scales. Core, almost Morse, again for randomized control trials. There are softwares. I use Distiller SR software. That was amazing. So instead of doing everything manually, you have a software to use to that. So for example, I had for each level a part, and then if you open, for example, level 1, you have a list of studies that are there, and if you click on each study, you get an abstract with the keywords that you decided yourself how to be highlighted, your forms, your inclusion criteria for. There are other software. I put here some papers that compare different software. I think they can send the slides to you. Because I think it depends on, your project, but I highly suggest using a management software. It will reduce your error and make your life very easier. Some courses, there is an online free meta-analysis course on YouTube. I put the link here. They use CMA software. I went to an advanced course in University of Maastricht by Wolfgang Wichtbauer. He's one of the big people in the field of meta-analysis. It was very good, very complete, also very technical. I was lost at some point. I did it before I start, so I really didn't know an idea of my data. So it was also late at night. There are a lot of tools for quality assessment. Here is again another paper that kind of says for each type of study what tools are out there. It's for medical research, and there is another thing again for medical research, but you can use them as a guideline. Final slide, final recommendation. Yeah, I think I said everything. Make your research question as specific as possible. Write a good protocol. That's really good. Use a review management software. Try to find a collaborator. Take advantage of guidelines and experts. Document everything and try to write down a template of your results in advance before collecting data. Thank you.
Thank you so much,